Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for taking time out of your evening. Just to explain, what does Anexo do? Anexo is effectively a one-stop shop for the victims of no-fault road traffic accidents, and we provide replacement vehicles for these people at commercial credit hire rates, and then we claim the cost of the car hire back from the at-fault motorist's insurer. Now, we specialise in what we call impecunious claimants, and these are people who do not otherwise have access to a replacement vehicle. And I'll come on to the process in just a moment. But as I say, we have in-house litigators to recover our hire and repair charges from the at-fault motorist insurers, and we have a direct capture business model. There's no statute on this, but it's underpinned by a number of UK case law decisions which go all the way up to the Supreme Court, which basically say that if you're an impecunious claimant, you have a right to recover credit hire costs. At our last numbers, which were in the first half of last year, we turned over 36.5 million, profit before tax was 6.7, and we were net cash generative. So we split the business into two units, the credit hire division called Edge, which has three main business units. That's provision of cars, provision of motorbikes, and also provision of bicycles. And we run this business through, we get our cases from a number of introducer garages. We have a network of about 1,200 independent garages, what my chief executive calls Fred in a shed. These tend to be two-man garages. They're not commercial dealerships as such, but they're two people under the arches who've got an inspection pit and so on and so forth. And these are people, when the accident victim takes his vehicle to them, they will recommend us and we will provide a vehicle to them. On the other side is the legal services division, Bond Turner. And basically, we look after the recovery of the hire charges and repair from the at-fault insurer and any associated personal injury or possessions claims. We also have an advocacy division, which I'll talk about in due course, which is led by Executive Chairman Alan Sellers. So just to explain how it works, and this is really the key to understanding how Anexo works. I'm sure that most of you will, when we've had road accidents in the past, and I'm sure we've all had one at some stage, the normal procedure is that we ring up our insurance company and the insurance company runs the process for us. There's no legal obligation to ring an insurance company, and our customers, the impecunious customer, does not tend to want to get in touch with their insurance company. The reason for that is that they are anxious to keep their premiums as low as possible. Under those circumstances, they will normally insure their vehicle third-party fire and theft. They will refrain from ticking the boxes which say things like, would you like a no claims bonus protection, and would you like a replacement vehicle? And perhaps most specifically, they will try and keep their excess as high as possible to keep their premium down. So all they're interested in is being road legal. What that means is that when they have an accident, let's say they're driving a £1,000 car and they have £1,000 worth of damage and they have a £1,000 excess, there is no point in their calling their insurance company. So what they do is they go to their local garage and say, look, I've had a crash here. What will it cost to get me back on the road? And if it's one of our introducers, then they will be put in touch with us. So their insurance company is not involved at any stage of the process. We provide them with a hire car vehicle for the whole period until they get the return of their vehicle duly repaired, or else if in the event of the vehicle being a write-off, they get a check from the insurance company at the replacement value of the vehicle. So that hire period can be for some considerable time. We then proceed to recover costs from the at-fault insurer. And what tends to happen with these is that we send a letter to the insurance company saying, you owe us the money, and the insurance company ignores us more or less all the time. We then send another letter, they ignore that as well. We then pass the case to Bond Turner, our legal division, and they issue proceedings. At that point, we apply for a court date, and we know that at that particular stage, we know that when we get the court date, that is the time at which we will recover our cash. Now, that can be a considerable period in advance, and at the moment, it's taking anywhere up to 24 months to get a court date because of the pressure on courts in England and Wales. But we know that at that point, that is where we're going to recover our money. Now, during that process, we are open to the negotiation of a settlement with the at-fault insurance company, and more often than not, there will be a settlement before we get to court, but we're perfectly prepared to do so should there be no response from the insurance company. So that's the key difference. So just to be clear, on the next slide with the model. There's my not at fault motorist. He's going to his body shop, he's going to his vehicle workshop. They are looked after by a team of sales representatives. We have 25 of those who cover England and Wales. And then, as I say, it goes into Edge, who provide the vehicle, whether it be a car, a motorbike, or a bicycle, and it goes to Bond Turner to claim the cash, and then we go to judgment or settlement. So what's our differentiation here? Firstly, we have the direct capture of the customers from garages. So there's no insurers or brokers involved. We are looking after the impecunious market, and I stress once again, these are people who have no disposable cash. They have no other means of getting a vehicle. They can't go to a car hire company because they don't have a credit card. They can't buy themselves a vehicle because they have no cash. If it wasn't for us, they would be on the bus. We are the only people really who do this. There's very little competition in the market, and yet we are a very small amount of the overall accident market. Less than 2% failure rate of cases where litigation commences, and 98.5%. In fact, I think now it's 98.6% of our cases settle before we go to court. Now, the operational highlights, these are fairly historic because they are the half year for last year. I've got some further updates later on, but just to be clear, one of the keys we want to achieve is to be net cash generative. Obviously, we tie up a lot of working capital in paying for the repairs and providing the hire cars, and it's up to our effectively our settlement, our cash collectors at Bond Turner to get the money back for us. So it's important for us to be net cash generative, and we managed that for the first time in the first half of last year. Post-COVID, we looked at our balance sheet. We had a placing to raise 7 million. We had an additional 2.1 million from a litigation funder to do with the VW emissions case, which I'll come on to shortly. And we also took a further 5 million drawn down from Secure Trust under the government's C-bill system. Now, in the first half of the year, we saw a marked decline in the number of vehicles on the road post the first lockdown on, I think, the 20th of March or thereabouts. But it was strange that came right down. They came down to about 25% of what we would normally put on the road in a typical week. But we saw a very strong rebound subsequently to that, and there are reasons for that, which I'll go into shortly. Similarly, we saw a slight decrease in cash receipts and fee income, but once again, that has started to return to normal. Just moving on, this gives you an example. These KPIs are very historic, but they give you an idea of the way in which we gauge our business. We're looking at vehicles on hire at a period end, or average vehicles on hire for the period. So you'll see that there was a decline in the first half of about 200 vehicles from the first half of 2019. That went right back up again in the second half. I mean, we were looking at second half numbers around about 1,700 when we put out a trading statement in November, and they've been consistently around that level. So completed vehicle hires on the year is something that we look at quite carefully, and we're confident that the completed vehicle hires for next year will be in excess of for this year, will be in excess of the vehicle hire rates for last year. Cash collection is obviously important. That shows us what's coming in from Bond Turner. And the way in which we're looking to increase our cash collections is to expand our staff. It's a very straightforward equation. More people sitting in the office equals more settlements equals more cash. So you'll see there that we've hired a significant number of new lawyers, including senior fee earners, over the period. And that is a trend which is continuing. Now, in terms of new cases funded, it's important to stress that we turn away just as much business as we take on. I think for 2019, which is the last full year figure, we put 6,000 vehicles on the road, but we had the opportunity to put 12,000 on. So we turn away about 50% of business, partly because we're not entirely sure that there is an absolutely nailed on at-fault case, and partly because there are better uses for our working capital than taking on what could be an expensive car to repair. If I take on a Range Rover, it may be a £15,000 repair, and I can put 5 motorbikes on the road for that price. So looking at business trends for the second half of last year, we stayed fully operational throughout both national lockdowns. Both the credit hire business and the legal business are essential businesses under government guidelines. So we maintained all our operations there. And as I say, the number of vehicles on the road reached record levels pre the November lockdown, and only came off very slightly on the back of that. Clearly, a lot of our customer base are people who are designated as key workers, a lot of healthcare workers, a lot of teachers, and so on. We also are very strong in the courier market, and you've probably been aware that courier levels have gone completely balmy over the last year or so. So that's meant very high activities for McCann's, who are the motorcycle accident management business. Courts have remained open. We've done cases over the telephone or via video conference where necessary, and so our cash collections are looking to be very healthy versus financial year 19 totals. We're continuing to recruit, as I said earlier, and I just wanted to mention CAMS. CAMS is not a big part of our business, but we've really seen a pickup in that, given the fact that one thing that did pick up in terms of sales was bicycles, and obviously it's very easy to have an accident on a bicycle. So just moving on to that, the trading update, which we put out recently, just to say that revenue growth is ahead of management expectations. And as I said before, we've still got very high levels in the credit hire division. Our vehicle numbers are going to be higher for 2020 than 2019, and we did have record cash collections in December. We have an office in Liverpool. We opened an office in Bolton in December 2018, and we announced last year that we would be opening an office in Leeds. That's operational as of the end of January. VW I'll talk to you about in a moment, but we've got 14,300 cases on that, and therefore our profit before tax is going to be in line with analyst forecasts, and our final results are due out on the 27th of April. So just to be clear, just to run through the VW emissions case, it's important to bear in mind that as well as the bread and butter work of Bond Turner, which is handling the claims against the insurers for our credit hire business, we do operate a separate advocacy business, and we are heavily involved in the VW emissions class action. I'm sure you're aware of this, the idea that VW was subverting key air pollution tests. They lost in the High Court and refused leave to appeal against the judgment of liability. That was in August of last year, and they'd previously been found liable and settled in the US, Germany, Australia, and Brazil. We basically attracted our customers through a social media marketing campaign, and also our group records. Obviously, we've repaired a lot of cars in our time, and it's very easy for us to look back through the records to see which of those might have been Volkswagens of a suitable age. So we separated out our advocacy team from the normal claims division, so that's not impinging on the normal work that we do. We stress that there's no guarantee of a settlement. Legal proceedings are ongoing, but any settlement would result in us receiving a proportion of any damages awarded and legal costs. Just to be aware that we expense all our employee time through the P&L. So basically, the specialist advocacy team's time has already been paid for. So any settlement that is reached is basically a windfall of straightforward cash. One other thing I wanted to mention was a new major shareholder, which you may have seen announced. We have a new major shareholder announced in November of DBay Advisors, who, with thanks to our last speaker, are also based in the Isle of Man. And they're buying a 29% stake from our founding shareholders at a price of £1.50 per share. You'll note that that's in excess of our current share price. They've currently got 9.9% and are waiting to acquire the remaining 19.1%. Following regulatory approval, that's has to come from the FCA and also the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. That always takes longer than one thinks and one would probably wish, but we believe that that will happen sometime this month. They have the right to appoint up to 3 directors to the board. We've actually appointed the CIO of DBay to the board as a non-exec last week. And our founding shareholders are now locked up for another 18 months, and you'll see the shareholder base. Alan Sellis, who's the executive chairman, and Sam Moss, who is the managing director of Bond Turner. Tina Slater is the sales director at Direct Accident. So there's still a major management stake in the business. So that's really what we do. I put appendices on here, which are the financial highlights for the 6 months and specific details of what went on in legal services and credit hire. I would stress once again, obviously that's relatively historic, and we're looking really for the final numbers, which, as I say, are out on the 27th of April. I think that gives you an overview of it. I'm very happy to take questions if anybody would like.
So, kicking off, someone's initially asked for clarity. You mentioned senior fee earners. Can you describe what senior fee earners are, please?
Sure, they're qualified solicitors. We employ a lot of people who are qualified solicitors, but we also employ a lot of paralegals. So a senior fee earner would be a qualified solicitor with a certain degree of experience. We hire a lot of people from the other side. There are defendant law firms who act for the insurance companies, and we find it both relatively straightforward and also beneficial to hire people from that side. So basically, they're coming from the other side to us, and we know that some of these people are extremely good because they've been opposing us for a number of years.
I think you covered this in your presentation, but just again, have been asked about the percentage of cases that end up getting to court.
Sure.
And you could comment on that. And then secondly, the time, getting the court dates, is the time frames around them, are they now improving those times? Or are they still getting out
Sure.
longer?
Okay, so firstly, less than 2% of our cases go to court, and those that do go to court, we win about 98% of them. By and large, and it's difficult to be absolutely straightforward about it, but by and large, if we lose a case, it's quite often because our client doesn't turn up. That may be because, for instance, we have a lot of courier clients, and for some reason, which I can't quite fathom, the courier industry is very full of Portuguese speakers, specifically Portuguese and Brazilians. And quite often, if you get a court date that's 2 years in advance, by the time the court date turns up, the guy's gone back to Rio de Janeiro. We can't track him down. So no client, no case. There are very occasionally instances where it's a straightforward he said, she said, and sometimes we're not believed with that. But by and large, it's purely because of a procedural issue. So as I say, less than 2% actually go to court, and we win 98% of those cases. I'm sorry, could you remind me of the second question? I do beg your pardon.
It's about court dates and whether they're getting, yes, the availability is improving or getting worse.
Availability is static at the moment. It's always a problem. I mean, you're probably aware that the large numbers of courts have closed in England and Wales over the last 10 years, and so that's reduced the amount of court dates available. If I were to ask for a court date now, I'd be getting one between 18 and 21 months' time. So it's a significant time lag, but we don't see that lengthening massively. In fact, the efficiencies of the courts are really not too bad. Don't forget, in civil cases, there doesn't have to be a physical presence. It can be done via telephone or via video conference. It's not as though you have to have a physical defendant or a physical witness.
What is your market share in the UK?
Well, that's a difficult one because it's very difficult to know the overall size of the market. The CMA review, which was last done in 2014, and that was a major review lasting several years, suggested that there were about 300,000 road traffic accidents a year, which would involve an impecunious motorist. Now, in 2019, we put 6,000 vehicles on the road, so I would suggest we're 2% of the target market.
I had a couple of questions about cold calls. Do you make cold calls seeking potential business? Is that a route you take to the market?
No, absolutely not. This is a direct capture model. So we get all our referrals from garages. Okay, we do have salespeople who go around garages and say, look, would you be interested in this? It's beneficial for the garages because they keep hold of the repair, so the car doesn't get taken away by an insurance company and they lose the money on that. They get paid in full and on time by us. And it's all about customer satisfaction. Their customer is very happy with the service they're getting. They're being referred to a business that will give them a replacement car for the period while their car's off the road. So the garages are very keen on it. Similarly, if it's a write-off, the garage's job is very straightforward. They can go out with their low loader, put the vehicle on it, bring it back. They can charge storage for up to 30 days. So basically, for that, it's free money. So we have no direct access to the public, nor are we interested in doing it. We don't advertise on the internet. We're not interested in people ringing up saying, I've had an accident and I might have a whiplash claim as well as everything else. We are interested in the vehicle. We do personal injury, but our primary interest is in the vehicle, and that comes from the garages.
Super. A couple of questions about autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars. And I don't know how far off these things are. What do you think the impacts of this could be on the business?
We don't really have an issue. We're not particularly bothered about self-driving cars. I think well, this is my personal view, and I'm not an industry expert, but I think self-driving cars are an awful long further away than we think there are. And it doesn't take very many setbacks for a self-driving car to become unviable. I think people are more interested in some ways in the electric car market, because obviously that's something which is going to be much more immediate. In theory, that shouldn't necessarily affect us very much. But the one thing I would point out is that both electric and self-driving cars are not the kind of vehicles that are going to be driven by our customer base. And I can assure you, one thing I'm absolutely sure of, the last diesel car in the UK will be driven by one of our customers.
I had a question myself about vans. It struck me that you thinking of couriers and these sorts of people, and you didn't mention vans. Are they part of what you cover?
We do a little bit of vans, but to be honest, it's not a huge part of our business. I mean, it's a potential for us, but I mean, vans is a very small part of our business. The interesting thing from our perspective is what vehicle will give us the best return on our capital. So a large proportion of our business, probably about 65–70% at the moment, is motorcycles. Now, there are various reasons for that. Motorcycles are relatively cheap. They're not very robust. That's, you know, if you're riding a motorbike in London, it's probably not a question of whether you're going to get knocked off as to when and how much it's going to hurt when you do. So if you have a £500 motorbike and it gets knocked down the road, then that's going to be a write-off. Now, a write-off versus a repair is quite useful for us. A repair takes somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. So our vehicle is on the road for between 4 to 6 weeks, and at that point, the customer gets his vehicle back, and we take our vehicle back, and that's the end of the hire. If it's a write-off, then the customer has use of the vehicle until such time as the insurance company issues a check. And as we know, as I think I've mentioned before, insurance companies are very, very slow on doing this. So it's quite possible with a write-off for the customer to have a multi-month hire of a vehicle while waiting for the settlement to be reached. And obviously that's beneficial for us. So we're primarily motorcycles. We used to be, I mean, 7 years ago, we were purely cars. And then the motorbike market has really grown, really on the back of what's going on with couriers, and commercials are a very low third.
And I've had a question also about the bicycles. What percentage of the business is in CAMS? That's the bicycles, isn't it, CAMS?
That's CAMS, yeah. That's Cycle Accident Management Services. It's a tiny part of our business, to be honest. We only launched it quite recently. We actually sponsor the women's British cycle team, so we had a little event for that. And you know, it's not a huge part of the business, but it's just interesting. Obviously, we don't repair bikes, so if somebody's bike gets run over, then you know, we'll buy them a new one. But it's a growth business for us. I don't really see it being a massive contributor to the P&L in any major form for a number of years yet. But it's a nice adjunct to the business.
A question about the vehicles that you provide to someone, I guess, in a claim situation. Do you own those vehicles, or are they owned by somebody else?
Sure. The cars and the vans are leased. They're on 2-year leases. We use predominantly Mercedes and Vauxhall. The bikes, anything 125cc and under, we own outright with an element of HP. We buy those outright. We're Yamaha's biggest customer in Europe. So those are actually ours, and they're depreciated on a straightforward basis. The rest is on lease. We're not interested in second-hand car prices.